So, yeah, sorry for the slight delay. We had one very busy man who got roped into this job at fairly short notice. But I'm very appreciative that he made the time to be here. Firstly, just to welcome you all. I know it's hard to actually pull people away from the competition, especially there's a lot of people get a good kick out of the puissance and whatnot. So I appreciate you taking the time to join us here as well. A massive appreciation for the three gentlemen sitting here with me for giving up their time. They're all very busy people, and I'm sure there's lots of things that they could be doing. But for each of them to agree to come and talk for the benefit of the rest of us that's here, it's very, very much appreciated. So how the event is going to work, for approximately an hour and a half, we'll have a mixture of questions, both that I have for the three guys. Feel free to ask questions. What I might do is maybe stop at different points and give everyone an opportunity to ask a question. I know one person texted me a question. I don't think anybody had emailed a question, so Donny, if I forget, remind me to look at my phone, look at the question. Actually, could everyone just put their phones on flight mode or silent, myself included? As I said, it's fairly casual, but it's less disruptive if someone's mid-thought or that. Yeah, so it's going to be a mix. It's for those of you who have listened to any episodes of my podcast, there will be some questions that I'm going to ask the three guys that I've asked previously, but it's for the benefit of those that haven't listened to it before. So as I said, I'll stop at different points, give everyone an opportunity. Once we finish up, probably in about an hour and a half's time, there'll still be hopefully plenty of time where if someone wants to grab a tea or coffee, chat to each other, interrogate the guys, you're more than welcome to. Except Tom's in a rush to get to an Aggie Can reception now. So I'm going to introduce the three guests, and hopefully modesty now won't get the better of them. But I suppose the most familiar to the Irish attendants beside me will be Tom Brennan of Millhouse Stud in Kilkenny. I think there's never been a better moment to have Tom talking to a group of breeders. Tom and his wife Sinead, who's sitting down at the back there, they're the breeders of Kilkenny that Cian O'Connor jumped to double clear on the Nations Cup last night. An incredible moment to force a jump off, an incredible win. And for any breeder, a lot of breeders dream of having a horse on the team. To have a horse on the winning team is something, but that's the second time that they've done that. If I'm not mistaken, the last time that Ireland won the Nations Cup here, another horse that they bred, MHS Going Global, was on that. And did he jump double clear? He was fairly close if he didn't. He did. And so, look, it's an incredible achievement. Obviously, both horses have been to the Olympic Games as well, back-to-back Olympic Games. So it's great to have Tom here. I also want to acknowledge two men hiding down at the back in relation to last night's Nation Cup. And the Connollys in Galway are some of the most modest men now you'll meet, but they are the breeders of James Can Cruz, formerly CSF James Can Cruz, who Shane Sweetenham put in incredible 2 rounds of jumping in what's only a 9-year-old. So if you wouldn't mind, before I go on to the rest of the introductions, and I know they'll be mortified, but can we have a round of applause for the Brennans and the Connollys? Because I think what's quite special is, like, there's a lot of breeders, even when the squad was announced, 3 Irish-bred horses in the mix. It gives everyone a lift. Then 2 Irish horses named on it. And then for them to go and perform like they did and win like they did, I think it just gives the whole industry that extra bit of a lift. And it's incredible, and it's important that they get their due credit as well. So hopefully that's the embarrassing over. Next to Tom, we have Dr. Guy Hodgson. Originally from South Africa, he's now based in Texas. He has his own breeding program in Texas, Royal Sea Stud. Guy is also a rider and an incredibly competitive rider in the Masters in Florida. God help anyone who comes up against him. If you think the 12-2s or the amateurs are crazy here, I think watch the Masters. It's about maybe 6 or so years since I first met Guy in Geneva at the World Cup show in Geneva, and we've since met in Florida. And I guess for the past maybe 30 years, Guy has spent a lot of time going back and forth to Germany, particularly Holstein, and has it's fair to say, obsession, I'd say, with Holstein horses, Holstein pedigrees, and is or was a board member of the Holstein Verband in North America, and maybe even vice chair.
Yeah, I'm the delegate Holstein.
Okay. So, an incredible amount of knowledge on horses, pedigrees, and I think it'll be interesting throughout the night also to get a US perspective. And last but not least, on the end of the table, we have Jan Greve from the Netherlands. He has been a team vet for, I think, all 3 disciplines for the Netherlands. You've bred international horses in all 3 disciplines, as far as I'm aware. He's been a very successful stallion owner. Some of the stallions would have even stood in Ireland over the years. And I think what's interesting is, and we maybe get to it later in the conversation, but you'll often be in different conversations about blood and the use of blood and what is blood and thoroughbred stallions, and a lot of people talk about the need to find them, but there's only a small number of people who I think actually put their money down and buy thoroughbreds and try thoroughbreds and try to find thoroughbreds. And Jan is one of the few people who I think has really tested out a lot of thoroughbred stallions and had some very good ones over the year as well. So we should have lots of different perspectives from the 3 gentlemen here. And just to get us started, and actually when each of you are going to speak, if you could just grab the mic and hold it up as close as possible. Each of you now have spent a few days at the Dublin Horse Show. And I'm curious, we might start with Jan and then work our way back this way. I'd be curious to just know what your thoughts were. And actually, I should have mentioned, Jan and Jean-Luc Dufour were judging the Breeders' Championship yesterday, and they will both be judging the Broodmare Futurity class on Sunday. So Jan has been spectating. He's been keeping an eye on the mares that are in the young horse classes, because how the Futurity works is it's the top 2 mares in the 3-year-olds, the 4-year-olds, the 5s and the 6s come forward for Sunday's final. So, Jan, if you wouldn't mind just giving me your thoughts. I think this is your 2nd time at the Dublin Horse Show, or at least the 2nd time, and give me your thoughts on what you've seen here, what you think, and the standard of the horses that you've seen this time, and the good and the bad. It doesn't have to be all positive. If there's observations that you've had.
I'll try.
Yeah. Okay. You're okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's a funny world here. It's you find a combination between the old-fashioned way of judging, like the Breeders' Cup. It's for me an old-fashioned way of judging, just looking to the conformation and how they trot in hand by an old man, so they cannot fully explore their qualities. That's the one way of judging that we did in the past. And on the other hand, we judged also the 3-year-old free jumping and 3 years old and the 4 years old. What's, in my opinion, is the modern way of judging a sport horse, to judge what he does and what he has to do. And that's very seldom that you find these 2 ways of looking at a horse in the same at the same show. So that's for me very interesting that you still keep that. And in the past, we always only looked at the conformation, and then we looked to the bones. That's it. And that should be a good horse. We hoped it would be a good horse. But for me, it's only two other things that are more important for the modern sport horse. That's the nerves and the brain. That's on one side, and the muscles on the other side. These two combinations make a good sport horse, and the rest is more. Maybe he can stand the pressure on him with a good conformation and with a good bone, but it doesn't make the sport. And that's for me very interesting to see this on two sides, but both sides are respected. And mostly is that one side is say, well, no, we have to look at the sport and the sport, and the other people say we only have to look at the conformation. But here you can find both, and that's the interesting thing to see what in 10 years will. For me, it would be interesting to see if in 10 years' time still is this conformation classes.
Could I just ask a follow-up on that? As the team vet for several years, as a breeder, you've attended a lot of shows around the world, and also, for anyone who doesn't know the connection, Jan is also the father of Willem Greve, and I know there's a lot of fans of the likes of Grandorado in the room as well, so he's been a successful breeder of horses and humans. He's reached the top in everything he's turned his mind to. But I'm curious, you have been watching various young horse classes, 4-year-olds, 5-year-olds and 6-year-olds, with a special focus on the mares, I guess, for Sunday. What did you think of the standard in comparison to what you see in the Netherlands, of the standard of the mares and the young horse classes?
There's not so much difference. We have some good ones, and the rest is 7 and less, and it's not very different here.
Okay.
That's international, might be the nature, I don't know.
That's positive. Okay. Guy, we might move to you. You've also been here before. It should be on automatically, I think. Yeah, you've also been here before, but you've also spent a lot of time. You've travelled. You've either competed or spectated at a lot of shows around the world. And yeah, you're no stranger to how things are operated from a breeding and a sport perspective in Europe as well. I'm curious to get your thoughts on what you've seen so far, either in young horse classes or international. You've watched a bit of both at this stage. What are your thoughts over the last few days?
Yeah, we watched some together, those young horse classes. For me to come back here to Dublin, I think the only other place that rivals this show is Aachen. I mean, the people understand the sport, the people understand the horses. Yeah, the quality, you know, that's, I've come here just to watch the sport. I follow it obsessively, as you well know. And it's as good as it gets anywhere. And I think the crowd is so involved in it. So that's been my motivation to come back.
And I think just what I remember when we were watching the 6-year-olds, just you had commented there are maybe some riders that if you're from outside the country, some of the younger riders that you've potentially never heard of or come across, that I think you were quite impressed with just how capable they were as riders. These like technically young kids, you know, that are going in and, you know, putting
well,
up to the best.
undoubtedly, Ireland has a very unique system, and living in the United States, what we see is the number of successful Irish riders that come and compete in the United States and how well they've done business-wise. And really that starts with the ponies. So I was watching the ponies the other day, and I watched the ponies today. I mean, you guys are insane. And then the parents are shouting to them, go faster. Yeah. It's unbelievable. But at the end of the day, they're being taught to go on a first distance and actually not fool with the horse. Just run that horse at the jump. And there's a lot to be said for that. You know, nowadays the sport is very fast. And if you watch the fastest rider in the world, undoubtedly is Julian Epiard. And he just rides to the next jump. I mean, I watch him over and over. How does he do what he does? And he just rides to the next jump. It's as simple as that. And that's what you guys do with your kids here, and it's admirable. And I think that's the key to Irish success.
That's interesting. Tom, now this is surely at least your second or third time at the Dublin Horse Show.
Yeah.
What have been your observations on how things have changed? We won't give away your age now. We'll even go in the last 10 years. What's your perspective on how things have changed?
Yeah. actually, I was going to start off here by saying I remember coming back here, and it's probably 45 years, and being one of the kids up on the trees over in the main arena watching the jumping and everything. And Ireland was at the top of the breeding at that stage. Like, we were breeding, we probably had 3 horses on the English team and 2 horses on the Dutch team, and we had an awful lot more horses from Ireland back in those days. But and we continued with that all along. But the sport changed and the jumps changed. If you go back to and look at any of the videos for back then, and you go into the main arena, or even I was talking to somebody about the Simmons Court the other day. It was a grass arena. There were 2 trees. They always had a gate coming out through the middle of that, or planks. The material was all different. It was much harder to knock a jump, and the jumps weren't set at the what's the word? The trickiness that they are nowadays. I've lost the word, technicality of it. Okay, so when you see Tommy Wade riding Dundrum, and fantastic combination and all the rest, but they got nearly 60 yards to wind up for the jump, and then they turned, and then they got 60 yards to wind up for the next jump, and that day is gone, unfortunately. So like, we continued to breed that type of horse for a long time, and we got lost in the business for a while, and our horses disappeared from the international stage to the degree that it was back in the 60s, 70s and 80s, and maybe scraped into the 90s, but then we were lost for a long time there, and we had to follow the Dutch and the Germans and the Belgians and everybody else. The Swedes actually got going as well. But thanks to, I suppose, systems they put in place here and everything, and the availability of the seamen to be able to travel, we changed our system of breeding here. And for me, looking at the jumping, like back then they were all lovely, nice horses because they're all competing. And then therefore maybe through the 90s into the early 10s, you could come to the show here and you might only see 2 nice horses in the class that you say. If you wanted to take home, you might only be able to take 2 out of the 30 horses that jumped, or 35 horses. But now, and it's continually from the last 10 years building every time, you could say 5 years ago you could take 8 or 10 horses. Now you could take 20 horses out of the class that you'd actually wouldn't mind owning and going on with. And that's now bringing it into the main ring. And we have 2, possibly we could have had 3 on the Nations Cup team again. That was unheard of back 10 years ago in Ireland. You know, everybody made a hoo-ha when Going Global got on it. He was an Irish horse on it, and sure, I really enjoyed that and everything. But I mean, there's lots more horses. I'd say we go forward 5 years from now, we definitely have 3, if not 4 horses on it, and we might have a horse or 2 on the other teams back again. We're catching up.
And that's just the MHS horses?
No. And you reach for the stars and you hit the moon or something like that. You have to aim high, and maybe that's what we try to do anyway. I'd be talking a load of bull and saying that we're going to have that, but sure, that drives me to try and do something extraordinary, and maybe it'll happen, you know. But no, you've put me off.
Well, no, actually, it could be a perfect opportunity to come in, because I just wanted to ask each of you to maybe, just to set the scene, everyone starts somewhere in breeding. Everyone's start in breeding is very different. Some inherit it, some it's a competition mare that gets injured that they really like and they want to continue with. And just to kind of, for everyone to get a feeling of your own breeding programs and how you started, because I actually think from previous conversations, you all have maybe quite a different story. And I'd just be interested if you could talk a little bit about how each of you got into breeding, but we might continue with you, Tom, if you wouldn't mind, and just set the scene for
As you're not going to get much time now after this. Okay. My mother was a Hughes, okay, and my father loved horses anyway, but my mother was a Hughes, and when she got married, she got a filly foal as a present when she got married in 1960, okay. My son actually won a gold medal in the ponies, the 148 ponies in Europe last week, riding a derivative of that. And there's another horse jumping out here in the main ring. Now, he's not doing well this week, but he was doing well. Is Mikey Pender's Calais, that he rides in the Global Champion Tours. That's part of that breed as well. So that's come back since 1960, okay? And another pedigree that we have, which is Kilkenny, who is linked to Going Global. But back in maybe 80s, the mid-80s, my mother went to a sale that was being held in Gorn at the time, Gorn Park. And it was run by Board na Goppel, which was the horse board nowadays. And she picked out a horse at it, and she wanted to buy it. But Mary McCann told her, listen, the army are going to buy that, you haven't a hope. And she was right, because we wouldn't have a hope. So Mammy stood back, and the army bought it. It turned out to be Kilcoltrim. It went to the Olympics in Seoul, jumped the wall here on multiple times, and had the record here for a long time. But when a chance came up for us to buy a yearling relating to that, maybe in the late 80s, maybe 88, 89. We gave £4,000 or £5,000 for a yearling at that stage, which was a lot of money back in that stage in Ireland anyway. And we produced that up to 4 years of age. And Max Howery bought it from us. He gave us 22,000 or something. And it went on to win the Junior European Championships with Max's son, which has been 140, 145 level, 150 level. He was a nice horse. He actually was placed in Mill Street into the young Ireland. He came through the system in Ireland anyway up to then. But with that money then we went back and we bought all the fillies we could out of Going Global's breed. This is a roundabout story to get how we got back. So out of that then we've got into the family, which is Going Global and Kilkenny, and there's a bunch of others coming along as well, guys. So I'm not finished with those at all. We had high hopes that won 150 classes. Okay, he's a different type of horse, and I'm not blowing him to be anything, but I mean, he's that sort of horse. There's Ballypatrick, Flyson. There's a good pedigree on the page anyway now that they've built. I'm not trying to push any of them along, but the fact that we got into that in 1980, now we're 30-something years later, and it's only coming to fruition. So it takes a long time to build a pedigree. So, I mean, some people go and they buy a mare and go from there, and that cuts out maybe 20 years of what maybe some of us have tried to do along the way. And I'd advise it rather than go back and do 30 years of it, because it's a long slog. It's really rewarding when you get there. And there's nothing more rewarding than having them jump in. I mean, the Olympics was fantastic for Kilkenny, but it's actually more of a kick here when they do it in home territory, because the poet is not recognised in his own country. But when they go back and do it here, everybody knows the horse then, and everybody knows who we are. So you get a little bit more of a kick out of it on the home ground. Not saying it. I surely enjoyed the Olympics as well at the time, but that's where we've come. I mean, we've dabbled in other pedigrees along the way, but we had another family. A line that came down from my uncle Seamus Hughes again, and we've tweaked it here, there, and everywhere, and we actually got another pony champion, the Coolmore pony. The Cavalli Dam came out of our place, or the mother came out of our place, but that family have delivered us numerous 150 horses and 140 horses and different horses, jumping horses anyway, that are very talented. Okay, so we kind of build on those three lines, and we've gone into other lines and tried them, but we've always come back to the lines that we've had. And when everybody was selling off all their wares back in the 70s and 80s, back when the Germans and the Dutch came in and bought everything we had, and the French and everything, bought everything, we actually held on to a few, and maybe that what put us in the position where we are, where I'm not saying we're anywhere on a number scale where we are in Ireland, but on a regular basis we have a nice horse anyway. I'm not saying it's a champion horse, but it's a nice horse. And that's what we try to do at home. We try to breed a horse that's maybe above the 50%, and after that then it's luck. I mean, for Going Global to turn out, or Kilkenny to turn out as good as they are, lots of things have to fall into place. You know, there might be nice young horses, but then they have to go and they have to get produced right, and they have to end up with Keane O'Connor, or they have to end up with Greg or Athena and Asses, or wherever they have to go to become the famous horses that they become. And lots of other people, and James Can Cruz as well. I'm not really talking about. When he was here in Ireland, we jumped against him in Belfast last year, and he jumped super. But you never, was it last year or the year before? Anyway, there was no way would you give your £1 million that he was going to turn out the horse that he turned out now. And Frad did an unbelievable job with him, Francis Connors, and he looked a super horse, but he looked maybe he was that much short of the blood. And then he went over to Shane, and Shane opened up the system, opened up the canter, and he's turned into probably if you gave somebody a choice to buy 3 horses in the world, he'd definitely be in everyone's shopping trolley. Okay, so it's amazing. You need a lot of luck for your wares to actually become what they are. You know, lots of people, breeders, might maybe have horses that never got the chance to do what some of these other horses did, but at the same time, you have to produce the product at the start and then go from there. So look, that's what. All right, I could stay going, but the lads need time to talk too. Okay.
Over to you, Guy. I think even in the podcast series, your introduction to breeding has definitely been one of the more different ones. It was a very, I suppose, methodical approach. So maybe you just give a little bit of background to how you ended up becoming an obsessive breeder.
So when I got invited to talk on this panel, I thought, okay, I'm with pretty esteemed guys that have bred remarkable horses that have jumped to the top of the sport. What am I doing here? And I thought, well, maybe I'm the common guy. Maybe I can appeal to somebody else out there who says, okay, somebody who doesn't go through that background, or parents that have done it, but somebody who, since being a kid, is absolutely obsessed with horses. Can you get into breeding? And so I think what Michael is trying to get out of me here is that I would go to shows. I mean, even now to this day, I have 3 computers every weekend watching shows around the world. And if you hear early in the morning, I will be the guy at the warm-up who's watching the first horse go, and also the guy that's watching the last horse go. That's, I've just been obsessed with watching horses and what makes a good horse. And that was the point that it came in at. I thought, looking at these good horses, what are the characteristics in a very good horse? Everybody can see a good meter-60 horse. But how do you find that horse before it's been found? So my starting point was to say, let's start to look at 2-year-old stallions. So I looked at hundreds and hundreds and went to approvals. I went in Holland, went in Holstein, and in other stud books, and looked at lots of young horses. Well, after some time, I started to get an idea. Yeah, you can actually see the ones that stand out in the crowd. Just as Jan said, there's a few that stand out in the crowd, and you can really see them. Well, then I thought, okay, how do you find that before that? So I started obsessively looking at foals, and I went and tromped through fields looking at thousands of foals in Holstein in the mud there, and at the foal approvals, but I was seeing the mares with the baby, and of course I knew the stallions, and I could start to see, okay, that's how this works. And that's when the seed went, you know what, I want to do that. So now I was on a mission. I've got to find the mare. So I took the short road. I've got to find the mare. Now, I'd spent hundreds of hours talking to knowledgeable breeders, and if one thing that they had got into my mind, that if you want to be a successful breeder, it's all about the mare. And I would say that to anybody, if you want to breed, don't take that thoroughbred that wasn't a good racehorse, that broke down on the track, that's got, I know we talk about conformational stuff, but problems, and hope that you're going to breed a top show jumper. That's not going to happen. You get the best mare you can. And then in Holstein, with my obsession on Holsteiners, I don't know if there's a stud book that's done it better than Holsteiner at tracking mare lines, what they call stums. You track the mare line very, very carefully. And there are particular ones that have great success. So now I was on this mission to go find a mare. And through that, I learned that I would see 2 mares. One would be a States premium mare, absolutely beautifully conformed. Everything was wonderful. Jumped a little bit normal, in my opinion, in watching. You would have this other one that might not be of that same conformation, jumps superbly, but is out of a very good mother line. And since that was strongly in my mindset, I went looking, and I got a video. I was sitting at the kitchen, at the Christmas table with my wife and her parents, and I got a video of 4 mares. I mean, not 4 mares, 4 horses. And I looked at them and I said, I'm going to Germany now. Well, I mean, they thought he's mad. It was Christmas Day, and I got up and I went to the airport and got on a plane and flew to Berlin, where these people picked me up. I didn't speak a word of German, and they didn't speak a word of English. And they proceeded to take me to Kloisterdorf, which was behind where it would have been in East Germany. I thought, if I die here, nobody's going to even know about me. Anyway, we arrived there, and I looked at the horse, and I ended up buying that horse anyway. And it was as good as it had been on the video. But in talking to me, and they'd got an interpreter there, the guy said, well, it's obvious you're obsessed with horses, when he was right. So I'm going to bring in all my young horses, and we're going to free jump them. So we had our cup of coffee that you always have there, and then we started at 6 o'clock to free jump all these young horses, maybe 30 of them. And we're going along, and it was about 10 o'clock at night. It makes me emotional. Sorry. It makes me emotional because I think it's that passion that if you want to be a breeder, you've got to be that obsessive. When that mare came in, there was no doubt. She was a 2-year-old, and she went over the first X. I thought, wow. And then she went over a few more jumps. And I could hardly contain myself, but I was cool.
Because you still hadn't her bought.
Well, I hadn't got her bought, but I remember just thinking I was overwhelmed. that was what I was looking for. And suddenly, despite all the others that I'd looked at, there she was. So we finished, we jumped the rest, and then I told the guy, well, that 2-year-old that you had, came in there, I want to buy her. He said, no, she's not for sale. So I said, why? He said, well, that's the future of my breeding program. Put his arm around me and said, look, I respect you that you could see that's a good mare, but I don't want to sell her. So I got on the plane, went back to Texas. But that's, my wife always tells me, all I did is I watched that video backwards and forwards every day. Got back on a plane and went back and told him I want to buy this horse. He still said it's not for sale. Okay, well, went back. And then on Valentine's Day, I went back, and unfortunately he'd been diagnosed with cancer. And he said to me, I'm going to sell that horse to you, but I want you to respect the mother line. So I bought her, and since that time, her production has been phenomenal. And the interesting part about that is that after I bought her, 2 of her full brothers went to 1.60 m, one with Marco Kutscher, the other with Eric Neve. And then after that, the cousins, so my mare's mother and Curtis's mother are full sisters. Curtis won gold on the Dutch team at Aachen, the World Equestrian Games. And, that was a validation to me that was the right mother line and that was the correct mare. So anyway, that's how I got into it. But I hope it gives hope to other people. If you say, look, I'm a little guy and I want to do it. If you get that, if there's nothing else that you hear from me and it's really not coming from me, it's coming through me. You've got to find the best mare. You've got to believe in that mare. You've got to be obsessed with her and find the right matches. And we can talk about matches and stuff later. Anyway, thank you.
And I think what's interesting, and maybe the part that mightn't be advisable, I'm not sure. I haven't met Kim yet, but it doesn't take a genius to realize she's very understanding. And I have met Tom's wife, Sinead, and I know she's very understanding too. But maybe the obsessive part is one thing, but the reoccurring theme is your poor wife is abandoned on Christmas and Valentine's Day, so that mare would want to be special.
Yeah, no, sorry, just to pop in, I'd agree with 100% what you said, okay, and you have to have passion. And you're saying you're coming in as the normal guy, you've just leapfrogged into where you should be, because it's all about the mare, in my view. 90% of it is about the mare. But most people here would know John Magner and the Coolmore operation. And I mean, and if you want to look, that'd be my hero in the whole business. The Aga Khan again, and Khaled Abdullah, the Judman place. I mean, they on a regular basis breed the top horses in the racing game. And it's not by chance. It's not that they're super judges that they go out and they buy these best horses, even though they buy so many of them. 99% of them are their homebreds or whatever themselves out of their own mares, and they're keeping the best mares all the time. What Coolmore put in their own stable for the last 20 years, there was Guineas winners and Oaks winners and all these. So they're going to stay breeding fantastic horses all the way along the way. And I mean, John Magner would never have bought or would never have kept a mare, if it just looked well and didn't do the business, unless it actually did the business. Exactly what you were saying. This mare came in and one was pretty, but one actually did the business, and you went for the one that did the business. I'm not saying it wasn't pretty either, but unless it hasn't got a resume to say I'm going to do it down again, there's no guarantee. And the success of a breeding operation is to minimise the amount of lesser horses that you produce, rather than no one hits the jackpot every time. That's foolish. When you cross X with X, you're supposed to get 2 X, but you don't. Okay, work or X and Y. I mean, you get X, Y. You don't get that. You get something else. But a good mare, like the mare he has, will never. Out of 20 foals, you might get one something happened, but of the other 19 foals she'll have will be above the middle line, and probably above the 3/4 line, and more often than not she'll get up into the 90 to 100%, being the exactly animal that you want. And that's what the idea of breeding is about. And if you had bought your thoroughbred, like you said, this broke down thoroughbred, you would be at the other end of the scale, and you might breed a superstar. But to be like, you might as well go and buy a lotto ticket and hope that you're going to win the 240 million in the Euro Lotto, which we all try every time. But we're all here, lads, and if we had won it, we wouldn't do it. It's the same in the horses. I mean, you got to limit your chances of being unsuccessful rather than being there's no guarantee with the success end of it, but you stack the cards that you have a better chance every time with your good mare. That's my call on it all the way, and we would have followed what they did in the thoroughbred business, just in our heads, like that's the way we would have done it anyway. I'm sorry for coming in and you guys your chance.
So Jan, would you just give us a bit of an introduction or a bit of a background into how you came into the breeding? And yeah, just how you first started off. It was if you had come in from a sport perspective, or if this was a family affair.
Yeah, I didn't speak, but I heard what I would want to say. It's all about emotion, as you guys told us, and it's the same in Holland. It's everywhere the same, and it's especially only with the mares. The mares is the key to success, and the special one. And like Mr. Hell said, you know, maybe Mr. Hell, he made the Holsteiner Verband big. He was a phenomenal horsemanship, and he said it all the time, they have it or they don't have it. Sie haben es oder sie haben es nicht. And when a yearling, you want to jump her the first time and she doesn't have the manners, she doesn't have the guts to do, and doesn't have the technique to do it, you can do what you want, but you never get a good horse, and it's you never can make a good horse in the way that they will change their manners, they will change their technique. They have it or they don't have it, and the ones that have it, that makes you emotional if you see one. But on the other hand, they all come from good families. I have now a horse at home that's very promising as a 5 years old, but 75 years ago, and it was an unknown family, but there was a horse in Germany that did 50 Grand Prix, and it was in the Nations Cup everywhere. So it was in the family. Nobody found it out, or they used the wrong stallion, but it was in the family. And the family, the lady, and now I have one that comes out of that family that has the same again. So it should be somewhere in the family, and you can find a horse, even it's quite unknown, or it's not so, it doesn't have to be very expensive, but if you find one with that background, it's always that one won't give you a disappointment. And that's what also people with not a lot of money, you can buy one from a family, and better buy a normal one from a special family or than a good one from a bad family. They never will breed. And there are some. And also this emotion, I can remember it was that Twiggy, it was in 1980. I was to a mare show, and I was a bit late, and I ran to the office to enter me, and then I stuck on the ground. There stood a horse, a yearling filly called Twiggy, and it was a 3/4 filly, thoroughbred filly from Lucky Boy out of a Corridon mare, and there before was a good French bloodline later on. Impeccable, amazing, so much presence that horse had. You stood on the ground, and I had to buy it. And my father was totally upset that I bought such an expensive yearling filly, but she had it. She had the looks, and she never disappointed her. The whole family. In Holland, if you come and you say, well, I want to go to the Twiggy breeder, for sure they send you to me. It's such a phenomenal horse, and that might be a few generations later, but it's still that emotion that makes the breeding. And it's the females that makes the breeding. Plain Sailor said, well, it's like a potato breeder. If he lives on the beach, he can buy what he wants. He never will get a good potato. But if you live on good soil, you can put in whatever you like, but always will be a good one. And that's a bit of comparison how nature works. You need a good filly, and a good bloodline, a good family.
And just to go back, was Twiggy your first broodmare, or were you breeding before you set your eyes on Twiggy?
Twiggy was the first animal I ever bought myself. My father had some broodmares, you know, used in the farm in the 50s. But that one was the first one I bought myself, yeah.
What was it about Twiggy that made you just convinced that you had to buy her? How much did you know before you bought her?
I knew that she was a full sister to a good stallion that never got a lot of chances, but the one he produced, the stallion, her brother, was very good. And she had so much blood, and free jumping was incredible. But see, I don't know what makes one lady have more looks and more attraction than the other one, you know. If you start describing it, you might end up with the other one, but... And that's what they need. Emotion.
It's amazing, even when I visited Jan's, it's amazing the one-liners that can come out from somebody whose first language is not English. You have some great expressions. From all the mares, so there's different patterns here. I think Tom and his family would have had a few different lines, as he mentioned, and I think over time have probably condensed more and more and more on Goran Lady, the mother of Going Global, and that line. Guy then has continued to focus on his Holstein 1916, and then Jan has a variety of different lines as well. You breed, were you saying about 40 foals a year, Jan? Is that correct?
Yeah, normally, what's normal, I don't know, but in general, we're speaking about 40, 45 foals a year, about 10, 15 embryos, and the rest, 1/3 dressage, and the rest is show jumping.
Okay. And could each of you just give me, as much as is possible, I know a lot of it is a feeling that you get, but for those maybe even that are earlier on in their breeding program, or those who realize that a change is needed in their breeding program or in their mares, could you summarize when you're going out to either look for a brood mare? Oh. If you're going out to look for a brood mare, or if you're trying to decide which of the fillies at home is going to enter your breeding program, what for you are the really essential qualities? And we'll go through each of the three of you. I'd be interested to hear your perspectives. But what are the really essential qualities that they have to have? What are the things you forgive? And what are the things you won't forgive if they're not there?
For me, they should jump. The first jumps are important already as a yearling. You don't have to teach them, but they come in the line in a little indoor, and they see a pole on the ground, and one that stumbles over it, and the other one says ta-ta-tum, and he's on the other side, and the next time ta-ta-ta-tum. You know, it's in them. If they have it or they don't have it. And if they have it, I go on breeding. And if they don't have it, they're not. And I only breed with the best ones. You know, 1 or 2 each year from the 3 years old. Don't have to go to show for me. I mean, but they must have this quality, and they never disappoint you if they have the quality.
I remember when we did the interview 2 or 3 years ago, you said something, and you said it really simply. It was another one of your good one-liners, but for me, it summarized a lot of what I was hearing and seeing in all these good breeders, but you just said it so simply about those special mares, or about mares and what they pass on. She cannot give what she doesn't have.
And that's true. If you don't have it, you cannot pass it on. There must be something in the family, otherwise you cannot pass it on. Where should you get it from? If you want to buy something, you don't have the money in the pocket, you never get it. You must have something to pass on. And only the better ones. And never start dreaming, okay, if I change a little bit this, or I make the distance a bit different, or I do this or so, then it might be better. All bullshit. The good ones, they do it by themselves. Yeah. And the height is not important for me. I mean, I don't say, well, she only can jump 130 and she might never jump 150. That good one jumps also 150. But the technique is important. It's important. They have to know how to do it, you know, and that's heritable. That's in them or not in them, you know. And they have it or they don't have it. And if they don't have it, you forget about it. And don't start dreaming, and don't start helping, or don't start be tricky or whatever, you know, or make a pole higher, or give them a bang or whatever. It's all only you fooling yourself, and that's it. And no more than that. It's just fooling yourself. It should be in the nature of the horse.
Do you remember what else you said when we did the interview? about helping them and preparing them. I thought they just kept coming. He was Jan was comparing that if you're helping horses trying to prepare them, and some of you will have heard the interview, David Burke has probably listened to it 20 times a day, and but it was just the comparison. Again, these expressions are just stuck in my head, but he was saying, don't be helping them, don't, you know, you're only fooling yourself, that it's like peeing in your pants. He said, it's only warm for a short while. And I thought it was, he has such good expressions.
Yeah, but that's it.
And Guy, have you anything you'd like to add to that on, even with, say, deciding which of the fillies out of that original mare were worthy of your breeding program? What are the questions that they must answer for you?
You know, I agree with what Jan says. I think it's correct. They either have it or they don't have it. It's a feeling. You can see it. To me, because I've had such a good mare, I've really focused on embryo transfers. You know, I'm sitting in America, don't have access to as many mares, and thought, well, that was the way to go. I've now got a daughter by Cardento. There's not a person in this room, if they watched her free jump, the first time I free jumped her, it was just wow. And to me, the things that I'm looking at in that, I mean, I think there's 1,000 things that you look at when you're watching them free jump, but the things that are important to me, I want to watch how they jump through their back. I want to watch what they do with their hind end. I don't want to, it's not just necessarily throw it to the ceiling, but how do they just keep that in their arc of the jump to create scope, and then also how square are they able to set their back feet and rock back on their hock and generate that power. So, I'd free jumped the others, and they were not as good as the mother. So I saw no point to breed them when I still had the mare. But this daughter, and now I've got a foal from her, and it's superb. So.
And out of curiosity, I suppose it's easier to talk about that particular example when you focused on just, say, one mare and her offspring. But you're in a somewhat unique situation. Some of us as breeders, we breed them and we sell them as foals, or we breed them and somebody else rides them, but you're riding your own breeding products and beating a lot of exceptionally wealthy people with their breeding products, which I'm sure is very satisfying, because the horsepower, and especially when you go to Wellington, is pretty insane. What are the characteristics of that original mare that are passed through to her offspring most strongly?
They all jump well or jump exceptionally well. I mean, I think that's the thing. If you have a good mare, it doesn't matter the stallion you use. They jump well. And I think, because we're going back to it, when you said one of the characteristics, for me, in a mare, I think a mare's got to be quite dominant. She's got to have character to be a good brood mare. You want one, like we always talk about stallions having stallion presence, but I think there's also mare presence. That you bring her out and there's just something about her. So, did I answer that? Yeah. Yeah,
and that was one thing about 10 years ago, which isn't that long ago, when I decided what it was that I wanted to breed, and I started visiting all good breeders in Ireland and in Europe. I expected that I would arrive at their place and see the mothers of these good horses, and they were all going to be this particular, like, really nice look, or this really, you know, the perfect size, the perfect mare that you'd describe if you thought, if somebody said, write down what the perfect mare is. But then I came away maybe a bit more confused, because initially, aesthetically, I wasn't seeing those kind of commonalities that I was expecting to see. But then as the learning evolved more and more, and I started to maybe pay more attention to what their characters were like, it's back to what you're saying, Guy. It was that kind of dominance, or that strong character, sometimes maybe a bit of a pain in the ass to manage, but that it was those, I've said it in many different capacities, but it was nearly those tough little fillies with that extra bit of character that seemed to be the ones that were giving more horses above the average.
Just to jump in there, lads, this is only in the horse world, not in the human world. We're not looking for dominant females in the human world, okay? They have to listen every so often. Okay, go on,
well, it's hard to top that.
He's only saying that because he's a safe distance away, Sinead. If you were closer to the front, I think.
What I would encourage somebody who gets into breeding, obviously experienced breeders would know that, but if somebody's inexperienced in getting in there, you need to be super critical. You need to look at your mare, or you need to look at the products that are produced and be critical of it. That's why I always say when people ask me to look at their mares and say, what do you think? I say, well, don't ask me if you don't want me to tell you what I really think. Because sometimes it gets to a point where I'll say, don't breed that mare. You're better off to take the money and go and buy a very good foal than to take the risk. It's my opinion, but that's what I tell them. Because in America, it's a bit of the Wild West in breeding sometimes.
No, and there's people in this room that we've had conversations, and you'll know who you are, and maybe there's a conversation about what stallion to breed the mare to. And in my heart, I cannot give advice because I don't think covering that mare is the right thing to do. And initially, there's maybe that bit of a jolt because you've raised this thing for maybe 3 years, or you've bought her. And it's not necessarily that I'm right, but if any of us are asked for our opinions, that's all we can give. But I think the few conversations I'm thinking of that have happened with people in this room, when the mare is sold, and correct me if I'm wrong, you can shout, but I don't think there has been any regret. It's just sometimes it's hard to let go of something. It's almost like we value what we have more because we have it, but sometimes even if you know deep down it needs to go, it's hard to let it go.
But I think the point is you have two very experienced breeders here, and they would have, Jan would say, I'm not breeding that mare. He would know because he's a successful breeder. So a small breeder still needs to be that way too if he wants to have success. Because you've got to emulate what successful people have done. And I remember going to Bauman's place, breeder of Ramiro. It was stunning. When I walked through his field, his mares were one after the other, all the same. He obviously had a type that he liked, and he was very successful, and they were just so consistent. It was amazing. And then you go to other breeders, they're completely different, equally successful. But different breeders have different ways. But learn from all of these people and go and look and ask. Because I asked thousands of questions. I find that knowledgeable people will share their knowledge with you. But you need to be critical. Otherwise, you're not going to get to where you need to get.
So, but that Ramiro breeder that proved that the brain is more important than the body. They look all the same, but they're not all successfully. But if you have breeders that have different types of horses, but I'm sure they all have the same brain. That's all willing to.
Sure, in the body. Yeah, no,
it's in the body and not in the brain.
But there I learned something right now. And I think that's the beauty of it. You've got to speak to people who've done it a long time. Because I will keep that in the back of my mind, where he's just told me a pearl there. That there's consistency in the brain. There's consistency in the attitude to do the job. Because that's a transmittable trait.
You ever look to a football team, the picture of 20 players that are doing football? You see some comparison to the one? A little, small, heavy one, a long, tall, blonde one, and then they're all different. Messi's but they're all good football players, yeah?
Messi's the small one, though.
yeah, but not always the big ones or the nice ones. But it is not, we cannot see it from the outside, it's the inside. And it's very important to detect what is the inside.
I think that's something in different conversations. A few of the people here are involved in different breeding groups that I've been involved in, or else they've heard me say this very regularly. That's one thing I have been amazed at, is the willingness of successful breeders to accept people into their homes. I think especially as well for younger breeders. And I know this is something I've definitely experienced with you, Tom. Your willingness to help younger breeders, to give them a push, or give them a chance, give them time. And there have been so few breeders in the last 10 years that have said no to having me to their place, or wouldn't give time, or wouldn't give an interview. And I know it's very easy to hear it and accept it and go, yeah, I know I need to do that, but it's sometimes daunting, especially the more successful someone has has been reaching out. But if even this evening can be an example of the willingness of successful breeders to give up their time for the benefit of others, like, this is a perfect example of it. This isn't just a throwaway conversation that any of us are going to mention. Like, what you're doing really is, you think, okay, I'm only a small breeder, I'm only a young breeder, or I'm only about to start breeding. But you're almost showing appreciation for the breeder by wanting to go and learn about what they have done. You know, it's nearly a compliment. If you reframe it in your mind, it's less daunting. And you're going to ask them about the thing that they're all obsessed about. There's no downside.
I think we've all made the mistakes. I mean, you definitely made mistakes, and I've made mistakes. And when you tell somebody, you're trying to tell them, you know, don't make that mistake. I said beside me here, like, he bought in at the top end, or you can buy the thoroughbred and go the long route, but it's going to take you 40 years, and 40 years is a long time in anyone's life, okay? You're better off to do what it was. So when you're talking about imparting the knowledge that you have, you're probably just trying... My father used to always say, listen to every fool. None of these lads are fools, but listen to every fool, because at sometimes they'll come out with something that will actually resonate with you down the road, and it'll stick to you. You know, you'll be making some decisions. You remember that, I'm not saying a fool, but he said something that you know, in this situation, that's what you should be using, okay? I'd compliment him for complimenting. Just when he said something, you took it straight away. I said, geez, that's in the back of my mind now. For, you know, that situation will come up for me at some stage, and I'll use it in as a tool. Information is king. Listen to everybody, and listen to everybody. You don't have to believe what they're telling you, you don't have to do exactly what they're saying, but, you know, tweak this, tweak that, and then get your own line. Breeding is all about doing what you want to do. I mean, if I tell you to breed, cover that mare with that, and you end up with a horse that you don't like, you're going to say, freaking idiot. If you breed your own horse, you'll actually like it a bit more, because of the passion of it all. So you have to really use all the information and then breed what you want to breed yourself. I agree with, I'm hopping around here now, the mare is 99% of it. Stallion is important to a point, and a good stallion always complements what you have, but the good mare will give you, out of 10 foals, you'll have 9 of them that'll jump beyond, you know, up to your expectation anyway, no matter what star they are. Because if you look at the results here, bar Mikey Pender dominating, winning bloody classes every time, but it's down to one horse. If you look at the results from a 2-star or 3-star show at any weekend, they show them on Mother Show jumping every week, the same stallion won't pop up every time. Okay, but the horses are actually bred out of good lines at the same time. If you look at go back along the mother lines, they mightn't have been 160 mare, but they would have been in good line. And what you were saying there, if everybody gets into a page and goes back maybe 4 generations and finds in a horse that's up for sale something that was really good back, you know, it'll come to the fore again. What you were saying, you know, you might have missed a little bit. It mightn't be just so dominant. It mightn't have jumped to the RDS for a few years, but back along the way you'll find something. It did something really, really good, and you do find those things coming out in it. And Michael was just saying, how do you know, what would you breed from when you're breeding from, what you're looking for? Well, if you have a good mare, like you were saying you have here, when you go out and you look at them in foals down the field, you actually see them in their canter. You nearly know what they're going to do before they come in. You know, you'll see if a foal is a little bit top heavy, he's going to jump a little bit top heavy. But if he comes down in a lovely, graceful motion down the field, you know whenever the hell you're going to get him into jump, he's going to be graceful when he gets to the jump as well. Okay, so I mean, when we picked our mares all along the way, we used to breed maybe 20, 24 mares, went between 3 brothers, three we all had different mares and stuff like that. But we always found at the end of the day, we jumped the whole lot into one day. It would be the same thing, 6 o'clock to 6 in the evening. We'd go out and get at them every year, the same thing. The best 3-year-old came out of 1 or 2 mares every time, no matter what you did. You know, you crossed them with this or crossed them with X, Y, Z, every time. And the first day is hugely important as well. What you said, when you see him going over the pole the first time, you can make excuses all you want, but if they do what you do, you then boom, 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 boom. That's exactly it. If they actually come down and they give you something the first day and you actually bust them to get them out the second day and see it again, you know, it's nearly the first one you take out the next day because you want to see exactly what you saw again, and the other ones don't really interest you anymore. You know, you lose interest very quickly. You're going for the top. So that's the mare you want to breed out of. There's no point in breeding out of something else, you know, because you want to be at the top end of your game. So the embryo transferring route that you were saying, and it's so difficult. The embryo transferring is so difficult. It doesn't work out the way it should, to the numbers that it should. But it gives you the tool to use to actually breed so many out of that good mare. And even now you could take 3 as a 3-year-old, 3 as a 4-year-old, 3 as a 5-year-old, and you could sell it as a 6-year-old, and you have 9 animals coming on from it. And if you're working at it as a business, it's a good business to do it that way, but it will break your heart along the way. The embryos, they will break your heart. It's far easier to get a mare and foal, a liver and foal, and have a foal than to do the embryos. I'm telling you, to break your heart. Okay, that's for sure. Okay?
I actually could, as you said, that I could hear a few groans in the room as well. I think there's very few people who have gone down the embryo transfer route that haven't taken a battering at some point, financially, emotionally, physically, from recipient mares or whatnot. I also think there's a point that I just want to make in case I forget it, is sometimes there's maybe a fear to buy a mare that if a successful breeder is selling the mare, that there's a perception that it's not good enough. And everyone's at a different stage, and I really hope you don't mind me using this as an example. But like, it's just because it's being sold by a good breeder doesn't mean it's a good mare. The mother of Kilkenny was sold before Kilkenny was the horse that we know, and
I'm going to come in on that now, okay? The mother of Kilkenny was sold. I had 2 full sisters out of... The mother of Kilkenny is a sister to Going Global, okay? She's by Guidam, and Going Global was by Guidam Jr. But they were both the Guidam de Revel lines. And when I had Going Global's mother, I had had it on the ground, and it was a lovely horse. And I sent the mare to a stud, which I'm not going to name. She had a foal at foot, and I had a yearling that I left a colt, which was a lovely colt. He was by, I don't know what he's by, but lovely colt. So I sent the mare to the stud, and she came home barren. The foal came home with scour. I lost the foal. The mare was empty. The yearling, when he came home from the horse show that year, turned out to be a wobbler. Coming down the field after, he was a gorgeous horse, and I going to the show and coming back from the show, he was staggering coming down the field. Now, I haven't had many stallions, I didn't keep many colts all my life, but. And I had I think that happens on an occasional basis with stallions if you keep them. Maybe I don't. But anyway, I had a full sister to this mare, and somebody asked me, "Have you something for sale?" And I said, "Look, this mare is not lucky for me. Maybe she'll be lucky for you, and I'll sell it." And I kept the second mare, which was a full sister, and she bred 3 lovely animals, 3 lovely fillies actually. And on the 3rd filly, she actually got a heart attack and died the 4th one actually. She didn't have the 4th one. She got a heart attack and died. So I actually lost the Guidam crosses, the 2 crosses of it, but I have several Guidam Junior, which are 7/8 or 9/10 nearly related to them, and possibly had more blood in themselves anyway. So that's the reason why I sold it. I didn't sell it because I actually loved the mare. I actually loved her type, and I loved everything about her. But I had, I have so many, and you have a business to run anyway, so you got to sell something all the time. So somebody came in looking for a nice brood mare, and I said, and he actually doubted the very same way as you. He actually said to me, "Why are you selling it?" He put in so many stipulations that if this mare doesn't go and foal after 3 times or 4 times, and if she has this or that, and I said, "Look, there's no problem. She'll let you go and foal. She just wasn't lucky for me, and she bred him. She was lucky for him anyway." Okay, so there we go. That's how it ended up.
A question I've asked in several of the interviews, and I'm going to ask each of the 3 of you: if you could own any living mare in the world, if you could take any mare, any sport mare that's currently alive, to add to your breeding program, who would it be and why? And I'll let you decide who wants to go first. Well, I'll give you a few seconds to decide it. Tom, you're up. You're never stuck for a few words.
You have what you need. You don't need any more. You don't.
My wife said I have too many, so that's... There's one, what's her name, in the south of Germany, jumping, the Eldorado filly.
Killer Queen?
Killer Queen. That's one that I think could do... Yeah, she does what I like to do. So clever and so phenomenal. Quick from the ground. That I would like to try, but I don't know the family. Huh?
I bet you're happy with what you have, because you've tweaked. I'm not saying that you can't improve it, but you like to work with what you have because you know what you have.
Yeah, and then come down also what you said. I start also with I tried this family. I could buy a filly, the full sister of this, the Victor, a Lucky Boy, and so on. But they don't bring me what I thought they would bring. So especially with the embryos, you come back to 2-3 families because the best ones come all from there, and the rest.
That's the same as what we did. We dabbled in other families as well, and you just come back to the same area. When the one she throws up the good 3-year-old every year, we only jump in a tree. We don't jump them as foals. I'm a bit more patient than you. I'm joking. But yeah, the same. And then you concentrate then on the top ones that you have all the time. So like while there's fantastic mares out there that you'd love to have, I'd love to have the mother of James Can Cruz and have another go at, you know. And
well, the lads are in the room now, so now's the time to get it done.
I know, but I didn't want to say that louder. To take the hand off me when I go up there. I'm not saying I have. I'd love some of your breed and all, but I love to stay working with what I have and just keep improving my own.
Yeah.
Because what we have produced, a couple of have been very, very good, and I just like to concentrate on that myself. Now that's not me saying I'm big-headed. There's fantastic mares out there that you'd love to buy, but I know it's not going to happen. I can't buy Killer Queen anyway. That's for sure.
Jealousy not always brings you luck, huh?
Jealousy always brings you.
Not always brings you luck.
No,
if you're jealous,
it doesn't. No, I'm not going to comment on that now.
But I think on that one, because I agree with him, the mare that I would pick would be the daughter from my mare. And I think when I'm listening to both of them, their answers there, is that when you breed, you don't want to go all over the place. Then you're not going to know what you do. You've got to believe in what you're doing and then have a feeling for it and try to do it the best that you can. Because, you know, if I were looking at mares, you could look at a Jour from McLean, and you could look at Crystalline. Both these mares jump incredibly well. But if I have them, I know nothing about their families. What am I doing? Where am I starting? I'm starting right there. With my mare, you can imagine, I've gone and researched, I know every mother and father back to 1850. So now, and I know the cousins and no Clearway, so no other branches. So I've got an idea of where I'm at. And I mean, I think you're saying the same. So I would encourage people, once you've got something and you believe in it, stick to it. Believe in what you're doing and keep doing it. And if you're doing it right, you'll end up where you want to end up, or at least in the right way. Otherwise, you're going to be all over and have no clue.
Totally agree. The only thing, you have to be critical every year again. You have to don't fool yourself and say it's half and that's the only one I have, must be better, it could be better, and shall be better, but that doesn't come. It is like it is.
You have to be your own biggest critic.
Very critical.
Biggest critic. Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah.
And I know the main problem in Holland, I think, was that in the 50s, all the farmers used horses. And they went to a show, and this one is a nice one, this one was a champion. But they forgot that all these horses that went to the show were selected in the farm. The ones that didn't want to work or didn't want what they want to do, they were gone already. So they all were pre-selected on the job. And then they had the nicest one. But then the job was gone to tractors, and then they thought, well, I will keep going on with choosing the nicest one, I will keep the better ones. But that was the main fault. You know, then you think you have a nice one, but it was not tested in the work. So we also must go back from only confirmation to the ones that are the best in the job that they needed for in the jumping or the dressage. And from that you can say, I have the nicest one. But still you must have a 150, 160 horse. You don't fool yourself by saying she's so nice.
It has to be 150 or 60 in the pedigree. It itself doesn't have to be the 150 or 160, because somebody actually rang me the other day and said the top 12 animals in the World Equestrian Games, none of them are out of 160 mares. Now, that's not saying that they were all 160 brothers and sisters and uncles and aunts and everything, but then they themselves, which...
I've got that mail as well. They said to me as well, but I think it was fooling us. I don't think it was true. Somebody want to...
Yeah, I know.
It's not true.
I know, I agree with you, and I was the same. I was saying, that's okay.
Shit, that's impossible.
The mare she wasn't let go to 160. I'm not saying she wasn't a 160 mare. I'd say if we let her out lose school, she probably would have done it. But it just happens, it's a fact that somebody can jump on. But they sent it to me anyway, and I got it, and I went, yeah, okay, boom.
I think it was somebody that spread it around to keep us back from these jumpers.
Well, no, it is actually. It's a particular guy in the US, and his whole tagline, if any of you have been on Facebook at all, I don't think this won't take too many dots to join to figure out, but there's a particular individual, he signs off all his posts, don't be a victim of marketing, and his whole thing is how all these mares that are, like, he'll look at a Grand Prix, a top 10, and he'll say, they're all out of career brood mares, or there's only one out of career brood mares, and I won't waste too much time on this, but just to add some clarity to it, he will say they're all, none of them are out of sport mares. But his definition of that is a mare that jumped 150 or 160. If you take the top 12 in WEG, several of them are out of sport mares, but they're out of mares maybe that jumped 130 or 135 for one reason or another, didn't continue. But the same guy will also use horses like Lappuccino as an example of being out of a career brood mare when she jumped internationally with Nick Skelton, Frances Connors, and Nadia Hanley. With anything you see, it's like take it with a pinch of salt. What I might ask, I have a whole list of questions, and to not be too selfish, because we could keep talking about mares and our obsession with mares, I should also mention, in case anyone's getting worried about how you're going to match Guy's studying, this sounds like he's had nothing to do aside from studying pedigrees. He also built a successful eyewear company and would have developed that for several years and sold that, and has 3 kids. So I have no idea where the time was found to do that level of research to study your pedigree back to 1850 and know all the parents. Are there any questions in the room before I continue with questions? I could. I have one that I got on text. You want a window or you have a question? How would you like the mic?
No. So the mare that Guy mentioned, what way was she bred?
Contender Olivet Copper Cold Credo in Motherland 1916. So to give you 1916 would be Clearway, Clearway being the father of Clarimo, who's out of the Mother of the Sea. So just give you, and there's many others that have come out of that. It's a relatively small.
And will you just hold up the mic?
It's a relatively small mother line, but a very successful one.
The one
to Contender.
No, sorry, the Credento daughter.
Oh, to a stallion, a proof stallion that I used to jump in the National Grand Prix in America. A Laval won Calvados, tumbled Ramses.
Was that
4,
Captain?
5, 6.
Or was that?
No, Captain is no. That was
that's King, out of the
King Arthur.
Oh, King Arthur. Okay.
So yeah, and that came about. Because we're talking about embryo transfers, and I've been through those embryo transfers and buying expensive frozen semen and not getting a pregnancy. And so late in the season, had my own stallion, and I haven't wanted to be the victim of always just breeding to my own stallion, but he was there, and I looked and the type match worked. So I had a feeling for it. And he'd bred quite a lot to other people's mares, so I had seen his offspring, but never bred to my own stallion. But I had seen 20, 25 of his foals. So I had an idea of what he was producing, and there was certainly uphill and rideable. And it was late in the season I tried it and ended up with a very, very good horse that jumped in the Prix in Wellington and in Tryon. So, sorry, did that answer the... Yeah.
It's still funny that we don't channel worldwide speaking. If you are, where does he come from? Then say, well, it's a Cadento, but it's Ramiro, and we mentioned 5 stallions. But we should say, well, that's a number, this is this family, and they use that stallion. No, we said this is the stallions coming from that family. But we all agree that the females are the most important, and we don't mention them as the first one if where the horse comes from.
No, but I think...
Well, and he did mention that it was 1916, the Holstein.
No, but I think that's an important point, because I can give you by example. I was in Holstein early on, something I learned. So we watched these 2 stallions jump. Stallion A jumped better than Stallion B. So I turned to an experienced breeder and said, oh, people are going to breed to Stallion A. He said, nobody's going to use that stallion. He said, but they'll use Stallion B. So that's odd. This one didn't jump. He said, this one's out of a brilliant mother line. Oh, okay. And he said, that's why they'll do that. And so when I went to Cardento, I went because of the Mare Estelle. 741, motherline. Yeah. So what I learned early on is that in Holstein, and I'm sure in other stud books, but I can only talk on Holstein, is that the breeders are very, very interested in the motherline of a stallion when they use that. So another example, say, would be Casal. We all know that he's produced a lot of very successful horses. But I knew him at 2, I saw him at 5 and 6, and he was never impressive, even when he was young. But his first foal crop, I was there in Holstein to see it, was incredibly impressive. And then now we've seen what he's done. But he's out of one of the best mother lines in Holstein. He's out of mother line 890. That's also the mother line of Berlin. But there were 3 sisters there that produced 8 approved stallions. So right there, and Capone that Kyle King jumped in the de Maurier and Spruce Meadows, I mean, it's right there. And that's to me, Casal is a great stallion, not because of Caratino, but because of the mother line. That's what's come through.
It's black type. Black type is what, black type. And that's, again,
and that's Cortello.
Yeah, no, I'm agreeing everything you're saying. Yeah. I'm just saying, when we use it, if you go back to the thoroughbreds again, and we use Coolmore because they're the preeminent here. It's just, it's all to do with the mother line. And when you go to the stallion, you're going back to see what that mother did and what all its family did. Like there was 50 sons of Galileo or whatever, but there's only a certain one that actually works the best. Because that mother line was a strong mother line. Again, the more black type you have, the more 160 animals you have in it. Now, I know embryo transferring and all this distorts it a little than what it would be 30 years ago. But if you can get an old family line that has so much black type, again, what you were saying, if you search back in the line, it'll pop back up for you again. You could just be lucky to get in. Not lucky, research your look. If you research it a lot, your look will improve. So if you can go back and get as much black type as you can in a family, that's the family to invest in, not the one that pops up and jumps super, wins the 3-year-old here, but there's no pedigree to it. You want the one that maybe finished 2nd or 3rd, but it's all along for the last 30 years they'll be winning all along.
Totally true. Yeah, the grandmother dictates. There can be not a black type mother and the grandmother, but if the grandmother is totally black type on the page, that one breeds.
Yeah, look, what we do is just what we do, so I'm not saying anybody do. But we never, now we do jump the horses and take embryos from them. But back before, say back 15 years ago, once we liked an animal, we had our lines that we liked, and you'd be out the field and you'd see a lovely foal, a filly foal, and you say, Jesus, I'll keep that as a brood mare. But you kept it as a brood mare, but you didn't keep it until you brought it in and gave it a little pop over, pulled the height of the table. And when it jumped the table and it did it again, like you said, you saw the back end, it flowed like this, and you did what you did, boom, 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 and it didn't have to go jump to 160, because all its uncles and aunts and brothers and sisters did it anyway. So you don't have to test this animal till it asks to see they want to do it. But once it has relations that did it, and it looks like the type that would do it, work away. That's the way we worked all the time. I'm not saying we're right, wrong, or indifferent, but that was our theory on it.
Totally agree.
David, you had a question.
It's just along those lines, but like we've a mare at home now with a granddad. That's very good. But how does that work? How does the mare keep it genetically and bring it through? And like hopefully that's not too naive to ask her.
It would be interesting if we knew that we could make money.
Yeah. But let's say what's so special about the mare? How does she hold her genes? Or like let's say the Ushiman Rose after line. You see stallions there, she's 4 or 5 generations back, but that's the marketing line. It's from the Usha line.
Can I get in for a second? In again, I keep using the racing end of it. In racing, you need one thing, okay? It's speed. You just have to get there fast, okay? So the daddy can be, you use the one daddy, he'll improve your speed maybe by 30% or something, maybe up to 50%. So that's why Galileo started. He was winning the derbies year in, year out. In show jumping, we need now I'm getting lost. Temperament, you need step, you need longevity, you need vascularity, you need to be sharp on the front of the ground, you need, help me, all the things we need, all the needed things. So there's no way that a stallion can come in and put all those things into a one cross. The mare has to have exactly what Yav was saying. Unless the mare has it, you ain't going to get it out. that you can bring in a horse that will give you maybe 1 or 2 improvements on it, and improve your end product by maybe, that's money my call, and I'm not saying I'm right, by 10 or 20% at best. Okay, but if your mother doesn't have it, there's no way when a stallion comes in he's going to put 50% in. That'll help. I know he puts 50% of the product, but no way does it come out the genetics. Yeah, the mare will have 80% of what comes out for me, and he's kind of said it as well. I'm not saying he's going to agree fully with me, but so your grandmother. I mean, if you cross that grandmother you might have crossed to a bad stallion, and the mare might end up a little bit lesser quality than your grandmother. But if you've used a good stallion, I know that's contrary to what I've just said, but there are some stallions that help a lot all the time. As in, they're in the pedigrees pretty often and do the business. For a terminal mare, a mare that's going to be there forever, you like to use a stallion that has been successful, that has a lot of success. In other words, he's helped a lot of mares. There's no point in using a stallion that maybe only got one animal. If that's the cross on the mare that you got, it mightn't be quite as dominant in what you do. I'm getting lost in what I'm saying. You could use 10 different stallions, but if you're going to keep a filly, you'd like to use the filly out of the stallion that has proven itself along the way, rather than a stallion that didn't, even though I'm saying that the stallion isn't as important, okay? I've gone round in circles and said nothing.
Yeah, but that shouldn't always have to be the stallion that produces the best, but it sells the best. It's a name that everybody knows. So if you have a good filly from this and this stallion, and that it's familiar to everybody, then they say, oh yeah, that's it. But if you have a young stallion, nobody knows, might even better breeding, but then it takes time, and then we also go sometimes for the commercial things. You have to, but
Helen,
doesn't mean that always is the best.
Do you want to come in there, Helen?
Yeah. You've really eloquently articulated that you're men of experience in analysis. I'm interested to know if there's any of you have experienced the wild card. Has anyone had one that's maybe you haven't spent a long time analysing, or a mare that you maybe didn't think, or a bull you didn't think was going to be your thing, but it's sort of gone against everything you're saying in the strange way tonight and giving you a surprise?
I'm going to say probably not. Rarely, because the mare you're trying to breed out of now is a mare that for me and what they've been saying, is a mare that you want. So it's not going to be a surprise when the horse comes out and jumps to it. It's going to be a shock if you get one that only jumps at 1.5 meters and won't jump beyond that. Okay, but that can happen. You're going to get something that will go wrong along the way, but most of the others will jump good. So in our program, we've abandoned all the mares that didn't. They're now recipients. If they didn't produce along the way something that was going to jump 150 plus or something like that, That's not blown, that's just saying that's what we aim to do. We're not challenged anymore to try and breed a horse that jumps a metre and stuff. And the market is looking for something different, I think. And there's a market for the metres, don't get me wrong.
Jan, in your experience, have you had any that came out of nowhere? Any top horses that have come out of nowhere?
No, they're impossible. Maybe I didn't know it. That's another thing. But if you look, there is always something in the past what you think, well, we overlooked it, but she had more quality than we thought, and that comes up one time. One of the biggest enemies of modern breeding and modern thinking is that everything has to be shown black and white. There are some horses that are better than the pedigree would think, but you have to prove it. And if the horse jumps 150, proven 150, in the ring, then you think it's better than the one that stopped at 130 because there were some reasons. But that might be the better broodmare. That might be the better broodmare coming from a better family. But we all want to see it. As I said, I select my mares as 2 and 3 years old already, and think you from the family I like, and the producer's good, and you jump well, and then I make her a broodmare directly. I don't want to spoil or to wait a few generations and that she can jump to 160s. And that's crazy that it is in this time of the world. There's a vet. Nobody asked me, as they did 20 years ago, if I vetted a horse for an American or an English or whatever. Then they call you up, say, well, you vetted the horse for my client. How was it? Yeah, it's sound on the heart. It bangs the ground. You can flex it what you want, and she has stamina. Everything perfect. You can buy the horse. Nobody in the whole world, nobody asked anymore for this the expectation or your experience with the horse. They only ask, can you send me X-rays? That's how crazy we are. Totally nuts. It's only the bone that you see on the X-rays. The only thing is the bone, and nobody asks anymore how good is the horse. And nobody asks, is this filly better than the other one? Because that one jumped 150 and this one 130. But that's a lack of knowledge and a lack of feeling and a lack of emotion like you have. And if you don't have the emotion, you grab the figures. And that's the biggest enemy for the breeding, I think. And also for the whole world. That X-rays, they kill the business. It's unbelievable at home how many people complain. Yeah, that they has a little chip here or a little chip there, or the back vertebrae had maybe an old problem, and there are some new calcifications, and they think, might it come back? Yeah, why should it come back if the accident doesn't appear anymore? It's a big thing. And the vets, that's the biggest enemy of the whole breeding, of the whole horse business. The vets. I'm a vet myself, but nobody says, well, I see this and that, but don't mind, you can buy it. How crazy we are that for the little chip, they won't pass it on, and maybe has a chance on 1 on 10,000, 1 out of 10,000 that it got a problem on the chip. But did you ever ask your vet, you think it might die on colic, the one I buy? Did he ever palpate? Yeah, but you're laughing out, but most of the horses die on colic, and nobody talks about it, because they cannot make an X-ray on that. But that's a very poor, poorness? How do you say that? Yeah. For the whole industry, and we have to take care that we don't go too far in there. In Holland, it's terrible. Everybody complains. Everybody. The breeders complain. The dealers complain. The owners complain. Everybody. Only of the X-rays. What we don't know, what we see. Yeah, we see some chip, or we see a little ossification or a little spur somewhere. But what does it mean? Yeah, I don't know, but it shouldn't be there. And then finish.
David, did you want to ask a question?
A different question, but I'll ask just on the X-rays. Would you rule, like a lot of people are doing pre-screening X-rays now on their 3-year-olds to see what's coming along. Would you rule out a mare out of your breeding program because there was a chip or if there was a little something on the X-ray, if she was special? Like, would you keep breeding?
It must be very bad navicular disease, otherwise I keep going with the mare if she has the quality. And the good thing about the veterinary is I can take the chip out without ruining the mare, but I never can bring the quality in with an operation.
And on his question, then, Yav, would you actually breed from a mare that was unsound?
It depends why she was unsound.
No, okay.
It depends why. If she's a navicular horse, then I would be. Then that's a problem. Yeah, if she was a real navicular horse, always has to.
Yeah, but if she was okay, supposing you haven't just gone in, and I know you'll investigate what it is, but would it be always in your head if that mare was a little lame, nearly constantly, like you wouldn't actually use her at all? You'd have to tell yourself, no, you're not going to go down that route, wouldn't you?
Yeah, it depends on what's the reason of the unsoundness. That can be that you think, I don't want to get it back for the foals and the next generation. Then you take her out. But is there a little chip somewhere? I just keep going on with it, or a vertebrae in the neck that has a problem. Maybe got it in the use, or somebody hit her, or whatever. Or in these how you call these big stables with all the bars. Yeah. So if it's essential, yes, but normally I don't.
You're saying an injury is fine. I understand. An injury is fine. If you get injured from the gates, that's fine. Yeah, that's okay. But if an animal that you had was, I suppose, going to be navicular, it's going to be something down the foot if they're going to be lame anyway. So you'll investigate that to the nth degree before you would breed from her. That's kind of what I'm just.
Yeah, well, I want to know if she's sound in doing the job, and not in sound that might be an X-ray not so nice, but she has to be able to do a job. Yeah, otherwise you spoil everything.
Yeah, no, I know that. Yeah.
Oh. So my original question was for Jan as well. Thoroughbreds. I know you've been very successful with thoroughbreds in the past, but in the modern show jumper, do you think thoroughbred percentage is important, or kind of thoroughbred stallion, does it still have a place in show jumping breeding?
Yeah. Then you look at a thoroughbred in two ways. One, you want blood, but what is blood? That's not only thoroughbred. You want sharpness, you know, how you call sharpness. And there are a lot of warm bloods that are sharp. My Twiggy came from a family that I'm sure they used her to plow the field, but at noontime they had to do another driver, not another horse, another driver, because they were still going. But that family is known for that, you know, they were always willing. I had one by Creole that was a son of Twiggy, and my daughter jumped a triple combination. She fell on the first one, but the horse scrambled up and walked through the second one and jumped the third one. But want to go that way, there I have to go. And that's what I call blood, and a lot of thoroughbreds have it, but I also had thoroughbreds that had no blood at all. They were lazy like hell, you know. But we use the thoroughbred for the brain, and the most are cleverer than the warm bloods. And we use them also for the elasticity and the ability to collect the body, to get the hind leg to, if you see a cheetah galloping, you've seen a cheetah galloping, you know, or a cat, that's different than a deer, with the head high and the back like this. We want the other possibility to use the body that they can collect. It can the hind feet before the front feet, so they can sit and race over the jump. And that ability comes from a thoroughbred, and more than from a warm blood. So I like to have a lot of that ability in the breeding. And most of the good horses have some thoroughbred in the past, in the spring. But first of all, and that's why we forgot it, if we had a thoroughbred, then say, well, okay, we need it. But if the thoroughbred didn't have the ability and the reflexes and the manners, how you call it, the attitude to jump, if they don't have it, then I don't want to use it. It can be nice as what, but then it's what you're going down, then you give in on the first thing that you want from the horse, that he's able to jump. So a thoroughbred horse must also be able to jump. I was lucky that I bought Julio Mariner, and at that time he won the Derby and so on. But if you ever seen, I have filmed somewhere, I must have looked it up. Amazing free jumper. And then he was 14 years old, the thoroughbred stallion. But if you saw the jump, you couldn't be so quick. Boom, and then every time again. And then his eyes were quicker than that, you know. Amazing blood. And that's what he always gave, also daughters of him gave it into the show jumping breeding. But that was because he could do it. Nobody asked him because he was a racehorse. But he was able to jump.
And do you think today we have enough stallions that are blood in their brain and blood in their body that aren't full thoroughbred, but that also bring that now, or like a blood type stallion, you know, like a camel bow or like something real sharp? Can he give that?
He can give that, yeah, but by him it always comes from somewhere. Yeah. And that's for sure. That retina, that if there's retina is in the coming forward, it's okay. But if it's too much Alme and too much Ramiro, then you don't want them as well. And they also breed like that, you know, heavy ones.
So I guess what I'm trying to say is, would you use a thoroughbred on a jumping mare today? Would you use a thoroughbred on one of your good mares?
I would use a thoroughbred on a good mare if I know that the thoroughbred also can jump, has the ability to jump, the good technique to jump. For me, he doesn't have to jump 150. If he jumps a 1 meter fence on the right technique and he can collect his body and he comes up with the withers and he can open up behind, if he has all this technique, then I would like to know to use a thoroughbred. And I think we still need it, thoroughbred. All the time you need blood in the horses, because blood is like salt in cooking potatoes, you know. Only potatoes you can't eat, only salt you can't eat, but you need it to make a nice product. And we always need that keeps going. But we should test the thoroughbreds much more, not only walking in hand and by somebody that trots it up. We should test them over the pole. And it doesn't have to, 2 cavalettes high is enough. And if he has the right technique and then the rest is okay, then I would love to use him. But don't use him, don't try to find a piano player among the football players, you know. you might be lucky. You might be have one that you say, well, I use this one, he's a very good jumper, but 9 out of 10 is not, you're not lucky. And that was a big mistake we made in Holland. We used too much thoroughbreds that we never tested as a riding horse.
But I want to jump in on this because I think, for me, looking at if you have a long-term breeding program, if you're going to just breed once for whatever reason, then I wouldn't use a thoroughbred there. But because what you really are hoping for, if you use a thoroughbred, is to get a filly. And now you've got a half-blood mare. Now you've got a lot of options here. And if you've taken advice of Jan, that the thoroughbred that you've used is a very, very good jumper as well, that's the position you want to be. Because now you can put on many option stallions that you think would work, and you've got the characteristics that you want. But if you look at in the ring there, how many half-bloods do you see where the father was a thoroughbred? I don't think even one. I mean, every now and then you see one, but not often. So it's not working in the first generation, but it works in multi-generations.
A lot come out of a half-blood mother.
Absolutely. And
the finals it was in Kentucky, I think. The finals of the World Championships, 3 out of the 4 finalists were out of a half-blood mother.
The mother, that's right. But you don't see it. You don't see it the other way around. It's the father. You don't see that.
No,
but
not directly the father.
No, and that's what I'm saying. If you've got a long-term view of it and you're ready to go to the next generation, it's a great idea.
And it depends on your filly. If you have a good filly and the family tries to breed too much heavy horses and too clumsy, then you need a thoroughbred to lighten them up, you know.
Has the thoroughbred changed a little bit? The thoroughbred that was used, that was successful back 20, 30 years ago, he's not the same thoroughbred anymore.
No, that's
the thoroughbred
right.
business changed what they were looking for. They were looking for more a downhill sprinter that boom, rather than an uphill horse, the old English type of English type of thoroughbred. And then if we go back when we were successful here in Ireland and using the thoroughbred cross and everybody laments it and all that sort of thing, but the stallion was used. He might be using racehorses, but he was also covering half-breds as well, sport horses. But now, if you went to John Magner and said you wanted to cross your good mare with Galileo, you'd be out of the place fairly quick, okay? Because I know it would be John Magner, but they won't cross a good stallion, a good thoroughbred stallion with a half-bred mare now because it degrades their stallion. So it's not good for them, for their business to do it. So I mean, but back 30 years ago, you could get the stallion will cover he'd cover a half-bred mare in the evening as well after the thoroughbred mares were covered. So that's why now it's very hard to get a good thoroughbred to use on your mare.
But you tried the thoroughbreds over free jumping?
No, but I've tried some crosses from thoroughbred crosses and they weren't very good. So I presume the daddy wasn't good to jump. We didn't at the time. No.
You should try. Just if you see a nice thoroughbred, jump, pop him a ball like this and no more. And if he breaks his neck or his back, then you know enough.
The problem is it'll probably take too long when you. Yeah, I agree here. What he's saying is we're looking for a filly. When you use a thoroughbred, you're looking for a filly to go forward again.
But also that filly should jump.
Oh yeah. No, I know that.
You know, a table or a chair, it's enough, but in the right style. Not like this, but in the right style, like we like it. Not in the way she jumps over the hurdles and, breaks her.
No, I'm saying that when we use the thoroughbred, when you use the thoroughbred on your sport horse, you're looking for a filly every time. If you just want to improve your breed by using the thoroughbred to get more blood in, like it's no good getting a gelding because that's no good to us.
No, okay. But in the meantime, if you use the thoroughbred to get more blood in your fillies, she shouldn't ruin the ability to jump, what she also can do.
Yeah, no, I know that, Jim.
And funny, in these lines in the thoroughbred busted family, they all jump. They all jump in the right way. Yeah. Busted and Yarko and several cannot.
You're back a long ways though with those Yarko.
But the funny thing about thoroughbred, we had a horse called Jim Twist. You remember? He won in Stockholm. Yep. He was a gelding. Yep. And now we have a clone, Jim Twist, Gimini. Yeah. But Gimini breeds well. They're coming jumpers from him. So then we use on a side way by using his clone, we use a thoroughbred that could jump, and he produced, but that one produced also jumpers in Belgium. In Belgium mainly where they use it. So it's very important that a thoroughbred horse, not only that we use him as a thoroughbred, we need him as a thoroughbred, but he also should not ruin our program. He should not interfere our program of producing a jumper.
I 100% agree with you. I'm agreeing with everything. It's just the ones that were allowed to cover half-bred mares weren't good enough to jump, and that's why they have a bad name now. There's definitely, like, if we went through every stallion that's thoroughbred and jumped them, there would be lots in it that would be good for the breed and good for show for the sport horse, but it's not going to be done because unless he's a failure in the thoroughbred racing game, he's not going to be used in the half-bred game.
You could not do it in the sales, the horse out of training sales. Just make a little pen to jump, make him a jump. I would go and buy that one.
But actually, just on the point that Jan is making, if I think back of all the interviews and the people who have probably the most interest in using thoroughbred stallions or using thoroughbred blood, it would be Jan, Bernard Le Courtois, Alan Waldman. All three of them are saying the exact same thing. If you look at the thoroughbred stallions they're using, they can all jump. They don't all have to have a successful Grand Prix career, but even when Road to Happiness went to Alan, he went in his late teens and Alan was still jumping him over small jumps to see did he jump like a jumper. He didn't have to have all the scope in the world, but the thoroughbreds that when we did the interview previously, it was they had to jump. If you look at the thoroughbreds that Bernard Le Courtois had used, they were all jumpers. If you look at what Alan Waldman has used, they're all jumpers. It's not just treating all thoroughbreds as equal. Claire, I hope Lara doesn't need to take the camera, does he? Or are we okay? Nobody's in a rush, are they? You're in a rush, are you? Okay, no problem. No problem at all. Donny, would you like to ask your question, or would you rather I asked it? And is this question from Shane? Okay. Another thing to mention while we're mentioning, we gave the nod to the guys breeding the successful Aga Khan team members. Recently, my understanding is for the first time ever, our senior young breeders and our junior young breeders both became world champions at the young breeders competition in Ermelo, and Donny Donoghue's son Shane was on one of those teams and also won an individual medal. Was he silver or bronze? Bronze. So it's another great achievement, and it's good to know the future's in good hands. So we might give a little round of applause. I know he's not here, but he'll be watching back. And so Shane had actually sent through a question, and I guess this is from the perspective of someone starting off in a newer breeding program. What's the best policy? Is he 18? 18. So Donny's son Shane was wondering, in terms of progressing a breeding program in a successful way, do you think that the best or safest approach is to go with using the successful stallions, or to go and use the really well-bred, like the really, really well-bred young stallions? Which is your feeling on which the best approach is for that young breeder to try and help guarantee success in their breeding program?
Yeah, of course we like to know and use only the successful stallions that we know what's going on, but we have to use the young ones as well, otherwise in 10 years it's finished. Then there are no approved no stallions that are tested, so you need every year also try a young stallion, and it's not such a big problem, and it's not such a big risk, I think. If the stallion comes from a good family that produces show jumpers, the family in general, then you also can use a young horse, a young stallion.
But I think the thing on that question there is you're not breeding on paper, and therein lies the issue. If you've got your mare, and then you think, well, I'm going to breed to Canaan, but it's the complete wrong match with your mare. Really breeding it, you've got to early on start to figure out what is going to work for me here, and you've got to have looked at a lot and understood it. And then my example is when I used Cardento, I went to VDL stud and they said, well, we'll bring him out. Here's on a rope. Go give him some grants. So I'm standing there thinking, okay, he's very angular. He's got a big, rather ugly head. He's short pastern, and he's the right mare. He's the right stallion for my mare. Just felt it like, I've got to do this. I told him, now I've got to get semen. This is right for my mare. And I think that's what it is. You've got to have that feeling, and so that's how you pick the stallion. Otherwise, you're doing it back to front. Then you're going to be breeding for paper, and you won't have the success of the person who's gone out there and said, this young stallion jumps very well, it's from a good mother, I got a good feeling for it, and I'm going to breed to it. I think that's the better way to breed, not paper.
The one we were most successful with was Guidem Jr., and he was a 15-2 horse. Okay, he was actually got injured, but he was a nice horse. He was a nice horse and all this. But his mother line was absolutely fantastic. He had multiples, 20 maybe. One, Narcartique, he's by Narcartique out of, I'm going to lose in a brewery, was the mare, and each of them had about 8 160 mares and all that. So to look at him, you wouldn't use him at all, and everybody faulted him for being small, but he was the best. Like, we got 18 hand horses, he got too big sometimes, but they just were so athletic and all the rest. So I'm after getting lost again there now.
The mother line of the stallion.
Well, yeah, no, the mother line. But we all go back to the mother line the whole time. If the young stallion has a good mother line, sure, he's not going to do any harm anyway. He's going to be as good as the good stallion. If you're going to the market straight away, you want to have used the good stallion, because if you're going to sell him as foals, it's a better chance of getting the big bucks for the Cannon rather than the son of Cannon, or the son of Cannon. And that's why everybody, what you were saying, we don't breed on paper. If you're a passionate breeder and you're breeding a horse, you breed differently to if you're breeding for the market all the time, or breeding for, the ICSI, and you probably get into ICSI, I don't know what it is. The ICSI is all about, it's a money game, it's a banker's breeding. It's a banker's breeding. That's my opinion of it anyway. I like to see you're smiling there. You have an opinion on it as well, Jana, yeah.
Could I just ask Sinead, how are you for time? Are you under pressure?
She's grand. She's not dominant. She's okay.
You mentioned you saw Cadento, and then you liked his horse, the short pastures, everything. But in you went, and that was directly you want to breed to Cadento, but you knew already that he came from the Bit family.
Well, so I mean, I knew he was out of a very good mother line. Knew I'm 741. I'd seen his stall. So I had, but in looking at him. Because I had other stallions where I just didn't have that feeling, and it just came over me. I just looked and I said, it makes sense on paper, but it makes more sense when I'm in his presence. I got the feeling this is the way I'm going to breed.
But you choose, your gut feeling chooses from one that's on paper belongs to the best ones. But then you choose for your feeling when you see the horse. You don't breed because of that he came from the Witt family.
No. That made sense. But then it was because he felt right at that point. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And that's what I encourage people. Don't just breed because it's perfect on paper. You've got to go to that next step and see that it matches. You've got to feel that it matches with your horse. And that isn't because you look at your horse and say, well, my horse is long back there. I'm going to breed this horse because he's short back, so it's going to shorten the back, and my mare's small, so I'm going to breed to this big one. No, that doesn't work. Maybe then you end up with a tall one with skinny legs. You kind of you can't just look at a stallion and think he's going to fix what's wrong on your mare. It doesn't work that way.
But nature already gave us the solution to looking at legs. They should have a short cannonbone, as you said.
Sure.
They should be with the hock on the ground, with the hock nearly on the ground, because we know that in nature the animals that are made like this, like cats and even rabbits, have a short cannonbone. They jump the highest. They can jump. You ever seen a rabbit jumping? In Sweden, it's a whole competition. It's really, that's true. That's the whole the big. They come with the rabbits to jump. Kaninhopping. canine hopping. You look it up. It's very nice to see. But they're all animals that sit on the ground. And the kangaroo sit with the cannonbone on the ground. And the cat can on the ground. And you see the animals that have with a long parson. You know them all. Chickens, they have a long parson. They have a very straight leg and a very long parson. But the Lord knew it all also. He gave them wings to come up. And look to nature. It's all, we don't detect it. It's all done there, but we have to see it. And most of we won't want to see it. We want to find out what nature gave us already.
I'll have to meet your wife. I'll have to see your wife.
Yeah, you can come and have a look. And I didn't know the family.
Does anyone have any more questions? I have other questions that I go to. I'm conscious that we're
actually she must. You've bred some very good kids to ride, so she must be very good. Okay, because it all doesn't come from the stallion. Okay, there's a mare line. Okay, she must be talented. What?
Does anyone else have any questions? And look, if I can encourage you, because often people go away with questions, and I think that's the worst thing that can happen, is go away with an unanswered question in your head, or you mightn't be comfortable and you'll ask a question to one of the guys after, but there's always a good chance, if you have a question in your head, there's surely one other person in the room that could benefit from the answer of that. And that got a hand. Come on, Nigel.
Yeah, just interested in your view, Tom mentioned it there, that is.
Buckle down, people.
On ICSI? What's your view on ICSI?
An ICSI.
ICSI, I used a few times ICSI, but only with old mares. I think it's important. It could be very useful with old mares. The uterus has been, not destroyed, but used too much or compromised or has an infection, and she cannot. The old mare cannot. The pregnancy might be too heavy for her. Then I use ICSI. And I have some 3 nice ones out of an ICSI program, so that can be good. I don't like the ICSI in the young mares, because to get the egg, you have to go into the vagina, which is outside world. So you go from outside world to the inner abdomen, and then you have to puncture also the ovary. So every time you get an egg, you have maybe 5 or 10 punctures in the inside. And I've seen some young mares that have been ICSI that are off the sport for a year maybe, because there are adhesions coming into the abdomen, and that hurts when they have to canter and have to jump. And so I saw some negative results for the mare that gave the eggs by the young horse. Being an old mare from 17, 18 years old, nobody cares anymore, and the horse doesn't care either. They stands and she walks and she's in the field and doesn't have to jump anymore. So I have an old mare. I use the ICSI. The young mares, we like to do the embryo flushing, which I never saw any problem with them. Not in the mind, not in the character, nothing. And the great thing about embryo transfer is with the young mare that sometimes we have a 3-year-old that we would like to produce in the past, because I liked her so much, but I knew if I have 2 fillies out of 2 foals out of her, and she's by the time 5, 6 years old, and then you have to start the sport, it's nearly impossible to get the body ready again to jump the big things. So by now, we can flush the mare as a 3-year-old or a 2-year, but a 3-year-old, and by the time you start riding her as a 4-year-old, you might already have 3 embryos from her. So then it doesn't hurt so much to use her in the sport, because I don't want to lose her for the breeding. And I can do the breeding with the flushing before she gets to sport. And you can train her in the meantime. If you have a pregnant mare from 6, 7 months, you don't train her anymore. But the one that you flushed, I had a special, very good dressage mare that I didn't want to sell. Unbelievable good mare in the movement and so on. But okay, the Swedish made it me so difficult, so they want to buy the horse, and I sold the horse. But by the time she left the place, I had 5 embryos from this mare. When she was 4 years old, and she was still in sport and no problem at all. So then that fills up the question, can I breed her because I or want to jump her? You know, if I want to jump her, I can't breed, and if I couldn't breed in the past, if I bred, I couldn't jump, and so that was all controversy, and that's gone with the embryo transfer. And the eggs we use for some older mares that I had a longer time already or came out of the sport, and then actually is no problem at all for me.
So David has a question. I have two final questions then, and we'll wrap it up, because from a selfish perspective, I could keep asking these three guys questions all night, but I'm conscious that people have places to be, and Tom's supposed to be at a reception.
David. So just a question for Guy. I remember the Big Talk for Breeders podcast, and I listened to it a few times. They were all excellent, but one thing that really resonated with the interview that you did was the way you analysed all the different horses over the years and how you can spot a jumper. And I know you've touched on it earlier, but when you see a horse, or this is probably a selfish question, it's for me to train my own eye, and I wouldn't have the patience to watch as many horses as you've watched. When you look at those horses, what do you see, or what are, I guess, what's your formula? How do you spot a jumper? How do you know that a horse? I
understand the question, and I don't have an answer for that, because there's 1,000 things. Like looking at a painting, and then you see, okay, what makes that a good painting? Okay. The best thing for you to do if you want to learn it is sit with somebody. Go to a stallion approval and sit and look at 80 stallions. And watch them jump, or go to the mare performance test and watch 40, 50 mares jumping. And I think then you'll start to see it, because there are some common characteristics. If a horse is very tight behind, I don't think it's going to end up being a good jumper. But there's many different types of hind ends that you'll see. I think you can look, I looked at that horse jumping yesterday. It was really impressive to me, was that little horse Missy. I'd never seen that horse before, this hot little mare that was jumping around there, and yet it jumped incredible yesterday. Another one I can think of on the circuit is that Cayman Jolly Jumper that's by Hickstead. It's completely unorthodox. And I wouldn't be surprised if you see that horse one day winning Aachen or winning Spruce Meadows. And then you can have very classical jumpers. I think over the time, my mindset is modified that there's not only one way, yet the good ones just look different. But if you look at Cayman Jolly Jumper, is completely unorthodox, as was Hickstead. Yet they can win all the major competitions. So I think you've just got to look at it, and you've got to look in the competition arena and see what they're doing, and then go look at the young horses. And I'm watching them all the time. There's just, I'm sure the characteristics that Jan might have that he sees.
What was unorthodox on this horse, and you think he still jumps? What was not right, or what was different?
Definitely not that something's not right, but I think that we have, say, you want a big bascule, a particular way of coming off the ground, not jumping over their knee, not being fairly high-headed, not what I call helicoptering. They kind of land like that. They don't land in a classical way. So it's certainly not a criticism, because I'm not saying one is right or one is wrong. They're different. But if you look at it, what I've always thought like a classical jumper. Give me a classical jumper. Well, no, he wasn't even. To me, Milton wasn't even classical. He jumped quite high head and hollow backed, and he threw his legs out. But you can take Chalou. He's far from classical, isn't he? He puts his front legs like this. Yet he can win anywhere at any time. He can strike. So I don't know if there's just one way, one type. And I want to add onto this, which is a little bit away from it, but because these gentlemen are breeding for absolute top of the sport, and they're breeding a lot of mares, and they've produced a lot of very, very good horses. But if you're going to be a really small breeder, and I think having spoken to a lot, they all say, I'm going to breed a metre-60 horse and so on. I think that's the wrong way to go. I think you should aim high. But the best piece of advice that I had, and you would have heard it on that podcast that I heard from a guy in Holstein, he said, breed a horse that's rideable. Because if it's not rideable, you're never going to sell that damn thing. Okay, only to a pro. And I think that was very good advice because they're not mutually exclusive. There are stallions that produce good jumpers that are rideable. And then you can have other stallions where they just create hell raisers, difficult in the mind and difficult in the mouth. Stay away from that if you're a tiny breeder. You're going to end up with difficult horses.
I particularly liked what you said first about going and seeing the volume and the good young horses, because David's booked in for his debut at the Young Horse World Championships in Lanark in September, and he's been meaning to go for a few years, so it's a perfect opportunity where you get to see maybe 700 really nice young horses.
But I think you decide what works for you. You know what I mean? We could both be sitting next to each other, and you're correct, and you know, maybe I'm correct from my point of view. What you like might not be what I like. Okay? But they both are good horses, and they both jump very well. And then you might breed down a particular way, and your horses jump in that particular way. I might breed and mine jump in a different way. Okay? Mine might be a little higher headed, a little flat backed, still jump. You might ask for a very big bascule and have a longer backed horse. Okay?
I'm just going to go to the second last question, and yeah, we'll maybe keep the second last one brief, and then you can go into a bit more detail on the last question if you so wish. So I think my feeling is from the discussions about your own various breeding programs, you all have different goals. Like what you're saying to David, you kind of have to breed, I guess, for yourself, what you want. Each of you have achieved a lot towards your own particular aims, but in the next 5 to 10 years, what's the one thing that you would each like to achieve in your own breeding program?
Get me mares in foal.
Well, he kept it brief. That's the briefest answer I've heard from you, Tom. That's the briefest answer I've heard from you.
That's the truth. If I can get them in foal, I'll be happy, because I'll...
Guy?
You know, to continue to breed rideable, uphill, good jumping horses that are useful in the show ring. And if they go on to jump a metre 50 and above, that's great. But how many people can actually ride those horses? When you look at it in who's buying, particularly in America, you know, tell you're going to breed a metre 60 horse, that's great. But how many metre 60 riders do we have there? There's a huge market. You know, a horse that can jump a metre 40 and jump it well is still a very, very good, useful horse for a lot of people. Valuable horse, especially if it jumps in a way that most people can ride it, because those of us have ridden those horses that flick you all over the place. Okay, and that's also difficult. So, you know, for me, I want to breed commercial rideable horses that people would enjoy, and hopefully they jump well. Yeah.
And Jan, is there something in your breeding program that you have particularly in your mind that you'd like to achieve or to do in the next 5 to 10 years?
Yeah, but we all agree to get sellable horses, horses that everybody like. I just want to turn it around. You said you want to breed rideable horses that hopefully jump well, and I do it the other way around. I think I want to have horses that jump very well and hopefully are rideable enough.
Yeah, you have Willem.
Yeah, that's more a dressage problem than a jumping problem. That the good dressage horse, you always forget who was on top of it, you know. And if you order semen from the stallion, you forget to order of the guy that has to ride him, you know. Then there's more the guy on top or the girl on top that dictates the result than the quality of the horse all the time. And that's the big destroyment of the breeding of a dressage horse, much more difficult, because the rider is there too important.
And that's why I always think it's very important to go back and look at videos from when they're young and maybe with a different rider, and you get a clearer picture of what it is that you're breeding to.
And I agree that the better horse you breed as a jumper, the more difficult it is to get a good rider on top. But the careful horse and the very sensitive horse and the clever horse doesn't let him fool too often. So if he gets bad experience in the beginning and he has to do efforts that it's impossible, then they stop. Then they say, well, do it yourself. This is not my job. I'm too careful for that, you know.
The last question, and I'm going to keep it on the podcast theme. Each of you have answered this, but you mightn't necessarily remember what you answered. So it'll be interesting to see if there are any differences. Tom, we'll start with you. And especially, I think it's quite timely, as Shane Donoghue, that I mentioned, who was very successful at the Young Horse World Championships, has just joined us at the back of the room. I think his father Donny went out to get him, so it's the perfect time for this. What advice would you offer to a young breeder or to someone at the start of their breeding program? Tom.
I'm going to take his answer now. I would actually go jump in as high as you can, okay? Because that'll get you so far up the ladder before you start, and then listen to all these guys all the time and use whatever information you get to improve what you can, but do it to your own, do it to what you want to do, okay? And there's a market for a nice horse, whether it's a 120 horse, a 130 horse, 140 horse, 150 horse. A nice horse, I mean a nice horse that jumps well, that rides well, with a good attitude. He'll sell no matter what. The higher up you go, of course, the better, more rewarded you will be. But he has to continue to do it equally as well. So you don't have to breed a 160 horse or a 150 horse. That's just, you happen to come on that mare and then she might stay doing it for you. But jump in as high as you can, and if you're not able to do it, maybe get a buddy that'll help you, and then jump in as high as you can, and then you can share it, because half of a good horse is better than having to pay all the costs for a bad horse. Okay, you know, the reward you get for half of a good horse is better than and if it doesn't turn out good, you'll only have half the cost of a manual. But from what the boys are saying, the better mare you have, the more chance you have of breeding a good horse. So try and get it as high as you can. You know, twist the bank manager's arm and try and get a little bit more. But do your research. Now I know he's going to say if you go down the pedigree, you might be able to find something. It's getting harder to do because there's clever guys like him around the whole time that are picking up all these mares. But maybe you are cleverer than a lot of us, and you can do it. And that's right. Do your research. They are out there. Okay. So.
Guy.
I would say a young breeder who's getting in is go and tap into the knowledge. Take up drinking coffee and beer at night, and go and spend the time with these breeders. In my case, in Holstein, I've spent hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of hours and just sat and listened to these people and picked their brains, and walked out in the field and looked at their horses. And I think it's just absorbing that, because unfortunately I think that that's somewhat of a dying art. It's getting lost. And these guys really, really knew what they were doing. They had experience. They'd learned it from their grandfather and so on. And it became about, because at the end of the day, when I see a good horse in the ring, I always say to people, that horse wasn't born, it was bred. Somebody sat down and gave it a lot of thought, and it's the result of that. And that knowledge is out there. But the more knowledge you have, and you'll hear strong opinions. I mean, they don't all. I mean, there are many arguments I've heard in bars, and this breed is saying this and that, because you're creating a life that people are really committed to it. But listen to all of them, and then take it from that, and then go ahead and do with that knowledge what you think. And the final piece on that, if somebody wants to, and you don't have a lot of money, the best thing to do is to pinpoint mother lines, in my case Holsteiners. There are well-known mother lines, and there are particular areas of well-known mother lines where there's been a lot of production, and go and buy yourself a filly foal from one of those. But you need to like that foal. Don't go and look at the foal and say, well, I hate that foal. Don't buy that foal. But if that's all makes sense, and then you really like that foal, that then gets you in, and now you have a very good chance of at least being on the right way when she can start to breed. And then study that mother line and talk to people about that mother line, because there are certain breeding things that'll come up, or stallions that work on it. There's a lot of knowledge out there. because I didn't have it. They, you know, these guys had much more experience. I had to go and acquire that knowledge from America.
Yeah, and I've got a nod to wrap up, so we'll leave the final word with you, Jan, the advice for a young breeder.
Yeah, it's been said already before. I had some other advice for you. If you go home and you remember that the soundness of a horse and the usefulness of a horse is more than reading x-rays, then I would be very happy if that came along. Thank you.
So, just before I let you all go, I want to do a few thank yous. Firstly, I want to thank my friend Claire Silk at the back of the room who helped with this evening. Cathal, who organised the sound, and Lar, who organised the camera, for the benefit of those who can't be here this evening. Thank you all for joining, and apologies, Cathal and Lar. I told them an hour and a half. So there's a bit of poetic license in that. But a very, very special thank you to Tom, to Guy, and to Jan. They've been very, very generous with their time, and I hope I haven't got any of you in trouble with other commitments. So can we please have a final round of applause for the three men? So all of them will be around tomorrow. Tom has to run for that function, but are you around for a few minutes? Jan? Perfect. Nope, that's it. Thank you all very much. Okay.